Well, thank you very much for a lovely introduction, and thank you, Amy and Suzanne, to organize such a splendid workshop. I see the attendance is, no, a forum. The attendance is so high, I wish my Thursday morning lectures at 10 a.m. Would be that full and well attended. So apologies, I'm very sick today. I've been in bed for 5 days. And I've just jumped out of my lecture and probably spread germs there. And, I'm really pleased to be here today. Everything I'm going to talk about today is about ways how you can use linked administrative data, or also generally panel data, to have an explicit knowledge about the institutions that govern, for instance, the care of vulnerable children, can be used to identify causal impacts of particular policies. Because that's what we're going to be after, the Holy Grail of whether a policy really, it was the policy that affected the vulnerable children, or whether it was some other confounding factors. And Paul was just talking about, you know, would you do correlation analysis, or would you do more sophisticated analysis? This is always the $1 million question. For instance, as you said, the kids in foster care, they're so special kids. There's a reason why they're in foster care. They've had a very different initial conditions in life and endowment in life, so you can't just compare them to other kids who are not in foster care. It's just impossible, and especially over time, which emerging trends may not mean this is the foster care. So we're always trying to filter out what is really in a causal way due to the policy, and only due to the policy, or due to a new institutional arrangement. Everything I'm going to talk about today is not about children in foster care, but about very vulnerable children in the Northern Territory. So, and that includes indigenous children, but it may not be necessarily restricted to indigenous children. Okay? So, what will I talk about today? So how do we know if a specific policy that we want to evaluate has a causal impact on the lives of vulnerable children? And usually, to produce such scientific evidence, you would really use a randomized control trial. There is nothing else that is better than a randomized control trial. And many nations do, or many nations in the OECD and also in other countries do allow researchers to conduct randomized control trials on all sorts of interventions to help vulnerable children, or children in general, or human beings in general. And I would like to point out the work by Jay Powell at MIT. This is the Poverty Action Lab that is running randomized control trials all over the world to help children and individuals to get out of poverty. And this place is assembling such a deep knowledge base about what works and what does not work. So this is Esther Duflo. She's probably going to get a Nobel Prize in economics. She's really running this whole show with others, of course. And what the J Powell is doing, they're really raising money and establishing relationships with public institutions, and to ask them, what are your research questions, and would you allow researchers to come in to help you run a randomized control trial? This is what J Powell is doing. And the University of Chicago Urban Lab is doing this too. So these are living labs that build long-term relationships between researchers and organizations in the field. This could be an NGO or this governmental organization. But RCTs are very costly, and you need to first establish this relationship, and then you need to follow up over a very long time period. And that may not always be feasible. So you may not have the money for this, or the willingness from the politicians or anyone around. So what economists have developed in the maybe last 30 years are ways to get around this problem. And we were not the first to come up with this, but maybe another solution to an RCT is possibly to use to exploit natural experiments or quasi-experimental evidence. And I will tell you in a second what that is. And if you have very good data that exists already, routinely collected data, then you can evaluate a particular policy exploiting a natural experiment that occurs, and then follow up on these children with data that exists anyhow, that sits on the surface of the government institutions, or possibly also from NGOs or general practitioners, so not ruling out anything. Or you have such a good data set as Pathways to Care that's explicitly following up, but that's also another budget item. Okay. So now I'm going to give you examples of some of my work in the NT, but also possibly from South Australia, where we're collaborating with child development psychologists and epidemiologists and obstetricians and pediatricians and mathematicians and biostatisticians to exploit linked administrative data that was financed through several NHMRC partnership grants and the Center for Research Excellence. And also recently we won a targeted call with which we can continue this type of work. And I will give you examples not only on income management, which is now termed the cashless debit card, but also on standard early life healthcare. What is the role of special care nursery assignment for children that are very vulnerable, and what are the longer term impacts on this? Obviously, this is not working because it's not turned on. Okie dokie. So why isn't this working? It's plugged in, right? Yeah, it's okay. So some of these policies, so the standard care we're looking at, special care nurseries is just a standard care, so we can't do, it's not a policy, it is a standard care, so we can't do anything about this. But income management was a very radical policy, and I will talk about this in a moment. But all of these policies, maybe you want to give me the point a little less. So this is a very simple graph from PowerPoint, but sometimes when we have policies, or some of these policies that go into standard care, they may have multiple impacts. So they may have these, by turning this wheel, you're turning another wheel, maybe positively. But you may turn another wheel that is negative. And then imagine there's lots of other spiked wheels here and here and here. And so one policy can affect something positively and the long run impact into something, and also negative. And what we really need to know is the net benefit of this. That's what we need to figure out. Okay. So what are natural experiments? Natural experiments are really something that's occurring either way in the institutional setup, how, for instance, a service is being provided and how it's being decided who gets a particular healthcare service or a family assistance service, or particular natural experiments that happen in nature, or through the trade system, for instance. So anything that creates some exogenous variation in the receipt of a particular service, or in your endowment at birth. You could think of, famines. Because of famines that have been exploited especially in public health, we could learn a lot about the early origins of health, the Barker hypothesis, because when mothers are exposed in utero to famines, was not due to their own making, but really to other reasons. And so you could exploit this exogenous variation of a shortage in nutrition in utero and what long-term impact it has on the health of the child. This all comes from basically the Dutch famine, and there are studies on Ramadan and so on. Ramadan is also something exogenously imposed in a Muslim country where everyone adheres to Ramadan. This leads to a calorie intake shortage. So this Ramadan is an institution, okay? Our society sets up the way how they were not adhered to religious institutions, but that creates an exogenous variation in, for instance, calorie intake or other aspects of a human life. And epidemics is another one of these, or whatever you say, economic crises, individual-specific shocks to exposure to diseases. But also these institutional decision rules, and that's what I want to talk about today. So for instance, who will admit it to a special care nursery? There are very clear hospital rules about that, especially in T. So this is not everywhere the same, but in T there's a very clear manual that the doctors have to follow, and they do follow it, as you will see in the data. Or who decides who can have access to an elite school? There's always a threshold for an exam. You have to sit an exam, and everyone who's above a certain exam may get access to the school, and who doesn't, does not. So that creates some exogenous variation around this threshold, because kids who are just a tiny bit above that threshold, and kids who are just below, a tiny bit below this threshold, are not very different from each other. You could assume they're just the same, just one missed out and the other didn't. So that creates a kind of a lottery that we are always looking for. Okay. Or the gradual rollout of a program, because sometimes programs are rolled out in stages. So for instance, income management was rolled out in stages in 13 months. So in every 3 to 4 week intervals, as you will see in a second, income management was rolled out to 3 to 4 communities. And the food stamps program in the US was rolled out in this way. And that creates an optimal control group for you, some random variation, because everyone in this pool will get the treatment at some point, but some will get it early than others. And so you can compare kids or families in communities that got it early versus kids and families in a community that haven't gotten it yet. Okay. So this is what we refer to natural experiments. In order to exploit these, you need to have an explicit knowledge of the institutions that you're looking at. You have to read a lot and understand a lot and how it affects families. So I'm going to ask a couple of provocative questions and then I'm going to go into details. So are neonatal intensive care units with special care nurseries cost-effective investments into Indigenous children's health and well-being? They're very expensive care provisions. So a night in a special care nursery a day costs $3,000 roughly. In a NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, costs $4,000. So a kid that is born with, very low birth weight, let's say below 2,000 grams, ramps up at least, 20 days times 3,000 or 4,000, $80,000 just on the first day born. So we have to think very carefully about this because these are scarce resources. And I plugged in Indigenous here because I knew that we're going to talk about a lot, maybe also about Indigenous children. And you see that roughly the probabilities to being admitted, this is for the different states, vary, but it's somewhere around, between 10% and 17%. In the country, in the NT, it's 17%, so almost one in 5 kids is being admitted to a special care nursery. Western Australia is an outlier, by the way. They measure the admission in a different way. So there's a lot of kids who are being affected by this. Is this giving a benefit? Here, so I'll show you this. And there was a Four Corners report from a long time ago that discussed exactly the price of life. And I don't want to be the economist who discusses this type of price of life, but maybe we can contribute a little bit to this discussion. Okay. So the second provocative question is, did income management under the NTR lead to better health, developmental, and educational outcomes for Indigenous children? And this question is very key because the reform targeted Indigenous children. It was the key objective of the whole reform. It's no longer today, so income management has developed its own little thing. And as you will see, so initially, I've come around so that we can all look at this. So initially, it was only rolled out in 73 communities in the NT. Could only be done by suspending the Racial Discrimination Act, which was an outrageous policy, and it happened very, very quickly. So, and then the government had to reinstate this Racial Discrimination Act, and therefore they had to kind of roll out it everywhere in the NT. But it's still today 90% who are affected by it are Indigenous, and now today it is being trialed, continued being trialed in the Kimberleys and in Seduna here. So the government has again committed resources in the budget for this trial sites. There is no particular, or there hadn't been any convincing scientific evidence on the effectiveness of the reform. And you may have seen in the media currently the audit report that talked about the implementation and the performance of the cashless debit card in Seduna. And so the Auditor General went in and came to the following conclusions. Maybe I have them here with me, I took them out just to save you some time. And they said basically the implementation is fine. There wasn't a particular muck-up with how the cashless debit card was implemented. So it's not always working perfectly, but people were informed in the right way in Seduna, and so it was okay. But what was missing still, this is a 2018 report, is any scientific evidence on whether this cashless debit card is indeed reducing harm, which was the key objective, even of the latest trials. So this is a 10-year-old development of the income management initially. And then they say routine government data should be used to evaluate this, and what this oh, they did not even cite our evidence because they're ignoring the kind of the evidence we have put out to working papers last year, and I'll talk about this in December, and a lot of media attention for this. So we show exactly how you can do this, and I will come to this in a second. So I will talk about today the Northern Territory Data Linkage Project, and maybe for some of you, you're interested, how does this even work? To put together linked administrative data resources, link them up in a jurisdiction, and then make them usable for researchers. And the key person who did this almost single-handedly, it's not quite right, but Sven Silbern, who was a professor at the Mendes School of Health Research and has just retired, he and others have lobbied for over 10 years in the Northern Territory, really knocking on doors in the government to lobby for this type of idea and saying, well, let's go to the Department of Health or the Department of Education or the Department of the Governor General of Justice and Department of Family and Children's Services, and even AMSEN, so it's an Aboriginal health service provider, even they got AMSEN on board. And I only jumped on board when Sven Silbern had finished a demonstration project of this. And then he said, would you like to be a chief investigator on a partnership project to finance this large scale? And so all these departments came and literally, as I put it here, sitting around tables, meeting after meeting and saying, yeah, let's do it. And SANT, which is an organization that makes this data linkage feasible. It's similar to Schurer, but it's very efficient project. So it allows you also to have the data on service at Menzies. And it's only a restricted group of researchers who have access to this, but it happened. It sits there as a forever living resource, a public resource. So we don't have to destroy the data after we have finished any project. So what we have done in the last years is basically thinking about what is good to evaluate with this. And we've written a monograph, and that led to a lot of, correlation analysis. But now we're doing the big ticket questions by using this data. And we have very little time, but look, data linkage. So we have juvenile justice data since a particular year, since 1999, child protection data. I just, raise my eyebrows because this is highly controversial data. And so this information has then led also to the to recent reports. NAPLAN, school attendance data. We have the school attendance of every child, of every day they attend school, and where they're registered. ADCs, the Australian Early Development Census, hospital admissions, healthy kids under 5, the child health records, immunization, birth records, and perinatal health, optimally from every child born since 1994. Okay. I would just like to acknowledge that because we work in the space of Indigenous health, that wasn't a target initiative, but 40% of the children in our data are of Indigenous background. So we do follow the NHRC values and ethics guidelines for ethical conduct in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research. But we have had, and we will continue to have, a steering committee with Aboriginal representatives who help us to interpret the data in a respectful and culturally safe way. So the special care nursery care, no, this is a double images. So this is a joint paper now with Steve Guthridge, who is a medical practitioner and epidemiologist, who is now leading the linked data project. Kevin Schneidl, who just left for Simon Fraser University, and myself. So I'll talk quickly about this. Or how much time do you have left? 5 minutes? No, you know what? I will not talk a lot about this because you want to hear the income management. What we did, just one word what we did in this, we wanted to know special care nursery. They're being assigned, there's a rule that the kids are assigned, that every kid below 2,300 grams goes automatically in special care nursery. Automatically. And you see this. It's a probability of 1, there's just 3 outliers here. And kids who are above 2,500 grams don't go unless they have something else. And you see some kids do go. And then there's kids in here. They may go if they're premature or if they have breathing problems. So you can exploit exactly this discontinuity here and here by comparing kids really who are just here with kids who are in here and kids who are in here with just here. So you get an average effect. So you can exploit this. to identify the causal impact. Of course, the causal impact in an RCT jargon would only be for those really around these thresholds. So we can only say something in such a natural experiment for kids around, let's say, 2,100 to 2,700 grams. There is no, we're not asking what would such a treatment have done to a kid around this 3,100 gram or 1,700 grams. That's not the research question. It's really around this. So if we had done a trial, we would have sampled from this group here. And so we studied all sorts of outcomes here. And the important result I just want to highlight here is, so we've done this for male babies, female babies, indigenous and non-indigenous babies. And what we find here, I want to focus here on this. This is levels of performance on the AEDC, the Australian Early Development Census, expressed in terms of standard deviations. And these indigenous babies who were admitted to special care nursery only because they were just at the right threshold, relative to babies who were just on the other side of the threshold and didn't get the treatment, they scored higher of almost 0.5 standard deviations in physical health and well-being, 0.6 standard deviation higher at age 5 in social competence, almost 0.6 standard deviations higher in emotional maturity, nothing on language skills and cognitive skills. There's a positive treatment effect, but it's very inefficiently estimated. And so we can go on with hospitalization data, with child protection data, with criminal justice data. We can fast forward the data we have for the kids, but I won't talk about this today. And then we can do a proper cost effectiveness evaluation about using these causal treatment impacts. Okay? But income management is much more interesting for you guys. I just want to give you a feel for what can be done with such type of data and with reforms. So we have two papers currently, one under review and one about to be submitted. So we really study the impact on school attendance because we have daily data. So we see exactly what happens in the community the day income management hits them. And second, the birth weight outcomes. So our babies, for instance, heavier, were in utero when income management was introduced. And that's what we would predict from economic theory. And the reform said explicitly, that this comes out of Mel Brow's speeches in Parliament when the act was implemented, to stem the flow of cash going towards substance abuse and gambling and ensure that funds meant to be for children's welfare are used for that purpose, and to promote socially responsible behavior, particularly in relation to the care and education of children. So income management initially in 2007 was introduced as the federal government strategy to deal with the behavioral causes of disadvantage. That's how they framed it. So you have to ask, what's it doing for children? There was other idea of John Howard to reduce humbugging to protect the female household members. We'll talk about this more maybe in question set. So income management, now I tell you a little bit about the technical details of how to use such a natural experiment. You see here on this horizontal axis the rollout dates of income management of every community. On the vertical axis, the proportion of communities that got income management cumulatively by a particular date. It started somewhere 12 September 2007, the first 4 communities got it. And then you see over time always like 3 to 4 more communities get it, over time get it, up until everyone got it. We produced this graph of the rollout. So you see down here, light communities are the communities who got it first, and very dark blue communities are communities that got it at a later point. Maybe I look around like this so everyone sees me with my black bag. These ones were the first. And then you see lots of variation. There's some communities who got it early, and some communities that got it quite late. The same up here. So you see this variation, and then you can use this variation in the following way. So by the way, we figured out there was no logic to the rollout. There was no logic, so we tested this with ADS data, because we talked to people in prime minister cabinet, and we don't see it geographically. There's still a chance that this has to do with the weather patterns, where it could be. Everyone's laughing, so you know more about the rollout than I do. I wasn't in the country at the time. And then what you do technically, and now look, this is really important. This is the key to make this convincing in a scientific audience, okay? That you say, well, let's take community 1. Community one at this point didn't have it yet, so it makes it a control group, but it will get it a month down the track. This is when income management was introduced. So then you can compare a second community, didn't get it yet initially, so let's say September 2007, hasn't gotten it in October yet. So now you can compare kids during this time with kids here, or you can compare kids here with kids in this community, or kids here with this community, and then you add just the third community, the fourth community, and then you take all these differences, we call this a difference in difference, you wipe out the community fixed effect, because some communities' kids are just better off in general than in other communities, and you take a difference here with a difference here, and a difference here, and then you average out all these differences. So you get rid of the community levels, you get rid of the self-selection, that's so important with the foster care children as well, as Paul described. And you control also for the different trends, there's a lot important birth weight trends, because if you compare maybe a baby here with a baby here, maybe the weather conditions were very different here, but it was at least the same time, so you control for that, and also for these comparisons, and for these comparisons. So we've done all of that. So I don't have to say, so we have, don't read this slide necessarily, takes so long. So what we can do is we have high frequency data. The education data is daily school attendance data. So we see, so the 12th of September in one of these communities down south of Alice Springs, we see exactly what the school attendance rates are just before and just after. And this high frequency data allows us to do exactly this. This is called an event study. What you see here is just, this is for all communities we have 73. You see here's income management was introduced at this point. And you see this is the school attendance relative to school attendance. This is in daily data on the horizontal axis. And this is the deviations in school attendance rate from day 365 minus, so a year before basically. This is 1 year, this is 1 year. And you see that school attendance, there was no particular trends before in each of these communities. But once income management hit every community, school attendance dropped by roughly 4 percentage points, which translated to something like 4%. It's a small amount, it's like 3 days. In some communities more, in others less. 3 to 4 days. In other cases, 8 for boys, it's roughly 8 days. In secondary school for boys, it's roughly 10 days. Why? Everyone would expect school attendance would go up because we take the harm away from the communities. So this needs to be figured out. And then, of course, later, after a year, it went back to the baseline. And we have the same for birth weight, and then I will stop. What I show you here is all the estimates that we got for our birth weight results. So these are public results, so yeah, you can take photographs and post them. It was already in the Guardian, so we can't hide it anymore. But the raw impact, so from this difference in difference approach is roughly 60 grams. And once you control for the differences in communities and for the seasonal effect, you get something around 100 grams. These are all different. What you see on the horizontal axis is all different specifications because you need to attack, the number that you produce. When we had the minus 100 grams, we thought we did something wrong, so we had to attack this number from all different sides and say what happens if we take out some kids in very small communities, or the like if you take out the early implementers versus the later implementers, or if we include also the healthy birth weight babies. But we get this consistently minus 100 grams. Mind you, in some cases, the standard errors go up, but it's because we have only 1,300 births or 1,200 births with which we can work across these 73 communities. And this has, of course, threw a bomb into the public debate, especially when Parliament was sitting in December 2017. So we think that you can use this routinely collected data in a very smart way to provide scientific evidence. But you can only do this in a long-term relationship with these administrators, the data custodians who know the data. You have to sit down at a table. It costs you 10 years of your life to do this, but I think Schurer does that too. Because you need to understand the institutions. You need to understand why a school attendance rate at this particular school is recorded in this way. So it could be a win-win situation. So for instance, the Department of Education was very surprised that we could produce such numbers for them very quickly at a routine basis. So now sometimes we react to inquiries. And last but not least, I want to put this up. The University of Sydney has just committed to a new academic strategy for the Westmead, which is a teaching hospital, but which serves one of the most disadvantaged populations in the Greater Sydney area and possibly in New South Wales. And it's committing to something referred to the Living Lab, the Westmead Living Lab. So I happen to write this strategy with others. And what this Living Lab means is that the university would like to allow to have researchers leave a civic footprint in the communities that they're serving. We don't really know yet how to do this, but that everything that we researchers do is helping the communities that, for instance, Westmead is serving. It's a very hard thing to do, but this requires data leakage. It requires also to put our foot into the schools or into the hospitals and maybe even conduct RCTs. And last, yeah, this is just advertisement. So yeah, this is all what I wanted to say. Thank you.